Devin, could you let me know when we're live?
I will do that. Usually a length of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
We are live.
Thank you very much, Devin. All right, is everybody ready?
Yep.
All right, let's call this meeting to order. Calling to order the Monday, June 8th meeting of the Tecumseh Public Schools Board of Education, starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Milt was on tap to do it, but he's running a little late today. So we'll let Suzanne lead us off in the Pledge of Allegiance. Give me just a second and I'll get that up. There we are.
I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the flag
of
of
the
the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Suzanne. Public comment on agenda items. We had no registrants for public comments tonight. Next up, revisions, approval of the agenda. Are there any revisions to the agenda, or could I get a motion to approve as written, please?
I'll move to approve the agenda as written.
I'll
Support?
support.
Roll call vote. Tim?
Aye.
John? Becky?
Aye.
Suzanne? We might have lost Suzanne. Can you hear me, Suzanne?
She can't hear us.
Yeah. All right. I will vote aye, and we'll work on Suzanne.
John, you were muted when you voted. I could read your lips, but
Yeah, I did read his lips.
Aye.
thanks.
My volume was off, but now it's on.
There you go.
Here
All
I
right.
am.
How do you vote on approving the agenda as written, Suzanne?
So I approve it. I vote yes.
Thank
All
you.
right, motion passes unanimously. Agenda is as written. Scheduled reports, we have math department, monthly finance, and a board study session report. Would you like to lead it off, Rick, with the math department report?
Yeah, I want to back up for a second, Kevin, to the good news, which is just a basically congratulations for the class of 2020 who under better circumstances would have graduated a week ago Sunday. So just a heartfelt congratulations to those kids. I think I reported to you, I had really probably the best hour of the last 10 weeks on Monday last week when we did cap and gown handout, and got to see those smiling faces and a large number of high school staff who were there to greet them and support the cap and gown handout. And we collected some items from the seniors, like music items and uniforms, and in some cases Chromebooks and other materials that were due back. But that was a lot of fun. Just to see kids excited and happy and on the school grounds was really nice. Other things that we have done, we've been observing the Friday Night Lights. We did that for about 6 weeks, wrapped it up a week ago with a kind of a celebration of our senior athletes. John had a nice little program there and handed out some things to the senior athletes who were able to attend. Griff and Jake at the high school, they collected all the I Matter signs of the seniors. Those typically come down and are handed out. So they did hand delivery at homes for a couple of days, a couple of weeks ago. That was also, I think, a real positive for them to be able to see our kids. We had a parent group who handled the yard signs for graduates. District-wide, we opened up a document to all teachers, K-12, to write letters to seniors. And that happened over about a 6-week period. So we made sure that every student received at least one letter from a former staff member. I think I wrote to 12 or 14 kids myself. That was well received. I sent out individual postcards to each of the seniors graduating. Thank you, Terry, for getting those organized for me. We still have a couple of surprises that we're going to wait until graduation to have for kids. But it's been a bit of a disappointing year, obviously, for seniors to not have some of those landmark activities, mystery trip and prom and things that they look forward to their high school career. So just trying to make a few things happen for them that would make it a little more memorable and spread those things out over time. So thank you to the high school staff, Mr. Mills, Mr. Anastasov, and the counseling department for a lot of the things that they've organized. And like I said, congratulations to our graduating class. We're still looking forward to a July 19th graduation. We're just holding off a little bit on the planning details because, as the situation improves and guidelines open up, that's going to really dictate what format and what venue we use for the graduation ceremony. So we have some ideas in mind, and we have some things that we know that we want to do, and we'll be communicating those details the closer we get to that specific date. Congratulations, graduates. So moving on to the scheduled reports. I apologize. I thought that I had shared the math recommendation with Terry earlier. Got a nice letter from the math department head, Will Ramsell, from the high school. I know he's done a few presentations for the board. So there is a 2-page detailed process described by Mr. Ramsell that should be in your email box, and talked about last year's process and the pilot program and the success and some of the things that they are going to tweak. But their recommendation is to move forward with full implementation next year of the Reveal program and also using the Alex platform for online instruction. So we will attach some budget numbers to that between now and next meeting when we ask you to approve that. But the department understands that moving forward, that will be the 712 math program. And also, he's got some recommendations in there for lower grade levels as well. So between now and the next meeting, read that over. If you have any questions, we can certainly address those. And we'll attach the budget numbers so that you know what it is that you're approving in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Rick. Apologies for skipping over the good news portion there. Scheduled reports next, we have Nikki Reinhardt with our monthly finance report. Nikki, are you with us?
Hello. Yes. I included your usual monthly finance reports in the board packet. May usually is a pretty slow month. It's the cutoff, the purchasing cutoff happens in the middle of the month. You'll see a whole hoopla of field trip refunds. We canceled a handful of refunds and or field trips and made a good number of refunds to parents for those. But other than that, May is probably one of our slowest months financially. So did anyone have any questions about any of those reports? Okay.
Looks like, wait, we do. Tim?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Nikki, it looks like we spent a lot of fuel in April for our first student. costs.
Well, I bet it's March or February bill, but let me pull it up and
Okay.
look at what you're looking at.
Yeah,
And then-
we certainly didn't go anywhere in May.
I know. I was like, well, we got $108,000 in fuel costs. So in April, I'm like, whoa.
$108,000. Oh, I know what happened. So this is that's not the fuel bill. That the requisition was entered in incorrectly with the wrong description. So that is the monthly bill for first student for their services. That's not fuel.
Okay. All right. And then Terry, did you get enough paper bags?
Yeah,
All
we
right.
ended up having bags to spare. I think 2,000, is that how many we?
I just see 1,000. I was just kidding with you.
Yeah, we ordered a second 1,000.
Yeah,
So
we had twice, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just call me the bag lady, Tim.
All right. Well, I'm expecting a lunch from you now. I think we're all going to get a brown paper bag lunch from you. So,
yeah, that's a big lunch.
yeah.
But I think they sold them to us at their cost, right? It's like $100 1,000 or something.
Gave it to us at their cost, but then they also donated 90 gift cards for families, which kind of offset our cost to them. So
yeah,
it was kind of a donation.
Good. Any other questions about the monthly finance report? Going once, twice, and gone. We are on to the board study session of June 3rd, 2020. Looks like I'm on the hook for this. Let me pull that up so I can, well, you know what, I'll wing it. The study session was strictly a budget session. A lot of what we talked about is continued into the night in deeper detail. It was a good initial study session into our budget, and everybody will see the ongoing discussion this week, and probably next week we'll have another study session. Rick, is that what we have on the schedule?
Yeah, I think that it would be important to have one more. I think that you all are expecting a little more detail, and we want to do the work that it takes to come up with as many items as we can that are a little further from the classroom than what we're projecting right now. So I think one more board study session between now and the budget hearing on the 22nd of June is a good idea. So I'll propose some dates and Terry will get it lined up.
All right, Milt, welcome to the board meeting.
You'll have to say the pledge on your own, Mil.
Oh, he's still muted. That's okay. Ah, there he is.
There, Mayor.
Welcome, Milt. We're on to discussion items. We have our 1920 final budget. Rick, would you like to present this, or are you going to have Ricky or Nikki do it?
Yeah, I think I'll leave it to the professionals. So, Nikki? She's still there?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. All right, so the 1920 budget, you received the full detail in your board packet for tonight. The changes from the last time that you saw this budget, which was at the one of the May board meetings, it reflects the cut that the state has made for this fiscal year. It totaled just over $1.8 million cut in state aid. And as a result, you see that the fund balance, that brings the fund balance down to just over 9%, 9.19%. So we were able to cut a few things. We were able to pull back some of the funds that we had previously transferred to capital projects in an effort to make up for some of this. There were a couple smaller things that were postponed or potentially canceled, about 20 grand in total, those smaller things. So, so we did what we could. The purchasing cutoff, like I said earlier, was May 15th. So folks aren't buying things from May 15th to the end of June. And really all that hits the budget there are, or the books is people, salaries and benefits. And there wasn't much we could do about that for this year. So that's what you see for the 1920 budget figures. Brings our fund balance down to 2.556 million.
All right. Any question? It looks like we have a question from Becky.
Okay.
Nikki, I know you tend to do it conservatively, and I'm just fine with that. My question is this actual numbers, or is there still some wiggle room in this?
There's plenty of wiggle room in here. So I left the same, slightly less, but same amount of wiggle room that I usually leave, just in case something catastrophic happens in June, and then we're kind of stuck. So there's lots of wiggle room here still. So it will definitely be better than this, better than what you're saying.
So I guess what I'm really looking to hear is, unless worst case scenario happens again, should we be above that 10%?
It won't be above 10%. I would expect to add $250,000 to $300,000 onto this number in savings. So to be more realistic, but I think that's just under 10%. So still under.
We're still in better shape than some schools. I know we're fortunate we had it to.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yep.
Tim, you had a question?
Yeah, have we gotten confirmation from the state that they are going to deduct $700 a student, or are we just still guesstimating right now?
I haven't seen any confirmation from the state for a final number. We do receive the state aid payment for June in a couple weeks, 10 days or so. And I'm hoping that they make the cut then, so we'll know something, but they're still just presenting a range.
And does that have to go back to the legislature to get voted on to reduce that, or since it was already appropriated anyway, or does anyone know that?
I'm not sure what the process is, Tim, and we're patiently waiting some official word from the Department of Education. The number that we're plugging in is from the economic projection meeting that was held in May. And since it was held, we have been using that round number of $700 per student, but there's been no further guidance on the specific number or if there's going to be a way to avoid that cut.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering because it seems like they already appropriated the money for this year, and the House and the Senate approved it, the governor signed it. So I'm not sure what her powers are with the MDE to be able to pull that money back without going back to the House and the Senate to get that done, or
Right.
if they just do it going forward for the next year kind of thing. So.
Yeah, and that recommendation, like I said, it hasn't come from the office of the governor. It hasn't come from the legislature
Right.
or MDE. It's just a recommendation that was made by this budget projection committee.
Okay. Okay.
To interject here, our attorney, Mr. Ray Davis, is with us tonight, and if he'd like to unmute himself, I believe he has something to say to the conversation.
Well, I was just going to say, and I didn't listen to the revenue sharing conference, which was on May 15th, that I think Rick has referenced. Nikki, you may have listened in, but my understanding is that there was a recommended, or it was expected that there was going to be a deduction in the range of 680 per pupil. And so not only for the future year, for the 2020, 2021 school year, which still has to be decided, but also a pro rata reduction for this year. And you're right, Tim, since it was already approved, I believe that's something that would have to go back to the legislature. So we're all just sort of keeping an eye on Lansing to kind of see, if we're updated. And I, Nikki, you may have more recent information than that by me, but for negotiation purposes, I'm telling clients not only to, consider, potential 680 or more reduction per pupil next year, but the state still may go back and do a partial pro rata this year.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Ray. Any more comments or discussion on the 1920 final budget? All right, moving on, we have our 2021 budget projections. I assume Nikki will be addressing this also, Rick?
Yeah, we're certainly going to want to get the detailed breakdown from her, but we had a good discussion on the 3rd related to some of the suggested cuts, some of the questions that board members had about other potential areas to mine for some of the funding. And then again, more questions about if this $700 is a hard number or if something is being done either at the state or the federal level to hold us harmless on that. So I think John was the one who suggested that we plan our budget based on the most expensive form of delivery, and that would be full face-to-face with all of our transportation and all of our staff performing all of their hours that they have in the past. So that's what we've built our budget on, is based on that circumstance. Nikki, details, please.
Okay, so you have a document in your board packet that's listed or titled FY 2021 budget cuts. This is kind of a working document here that we've been passing around amongst ourselves here for the last couple of weeks. And this is a list of the current list of the positions that would be slated for budget cut and savings. Some of these things will already be savings. And some of these things would be actions for next year. The positions here are a combination of closing the East Steam building next year and the positions that would be eliminated as a result of that, but also some other areas that I think Rick was thinking, if we go all virtual, we wouldn't need some of these positions at all. But if we are as John would say, butts in seats, then we have some leeway within the group that makes up that staffing group. The transportation savings there, that's the 3.5 routes that that Ben Newsom has told us he is looking to reduce next year, plus the excise tax savings. We would reduce contribution to capital projects by 100,000, and that would actually put our contribution to capital projects at the same level that it was at the beginning of this year. So we had bumped it up this year, and we're proposing that we bump it back down to what it was at the beginning of this year, which was $200,000 in total. The director of operations, the assistant director of facilities, those positions were slated to end June 30th, and then the last line there. So there are these, that's a total of, a little over $1 million. We have only $800,000 to go. So we've got some ideas there, other areas to consider. I know Rick had mentioned the certified staff and waiting on evaluations. I think those were due last Friday. And the pay to play expected revenue, that revenue there would be, if the amount charged would be somewhere between $100 to $150 a sport. And then I know the athletic budget detail was requested, so I've outlined that as well at the bottom of the page. So it's a little difficult. I mean, I know you guys, you received the full detail for the final revision, and we're really $800,000 high for the proposed. So that's kind of where we sit, I guess.
All right. Any questions for Nikki on this? As I said earlier, this will be part of our ongoing workshop series for the board, drilling down into our budget. We'll be dealing with these and other things in greater depth, and we'll be revisiting this again at our next board meeting also. So it is certainly not something that needs to be rushed tonight. And of course, if you think of something, write it down, email it off to myself, Rick, and Rick will get a hold of it, get us answers, and we'll put that all together for our next meeting. It looks like Milt has something to say. As soon as I get him, there he is. Are you with us?
One quick question, Nikki. You said $800 high. That means you got to cut 800 more, or?
Yeah, we'll need to come up with 800. So the cut was a little over 1.8 million. And our running list here is a little over $1 million in cuts. So we're looking to make up the difference there still before we have a full budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Last call. Any other questions for Nikki or Rick on this?
Quick, just under other areas to consider, reduction to building level. What amount is that? Is there a dollar number for that?
Yeah, so currently they receive $65 a student to spend in the classroom. Each building has, a in the classroom budget per se, and then support level budgets all the way up to the principal budget. But in the classroom, they get a budget of $65 a student every year.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, John?
One of the things that we talked about in the budget meeting was the fact that we're probably going to have to hire more custodians, or at least have more cleaning crews. And I don't see that added to this. We have a reduction of 2 custodians, which, based on all the information that I've been reading, we're going to have to clean the schools more often now than what we were. So the removing 2 custodians concerns me.
I think, now I'm drawing this from my memory, but I believe Rick and I did discuss that at one point, and we started the year off with not enough custodial staff. And over the course of the year, we increased it to an appropriate level. So when we're backing off we're not backing off of what we had in the first half of the year that was inadequate man hours to get the job done. We're backing off what we ended with. But Rick, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And we haven't had a detailed discussion yet about what sort of manpower will be needed. We know that we're certainly going to have to disinfect in different ways. But there's equipment that can cover square footage relatively quickly with disinfectant. So we're looking at that as a possibility instead of human capital.
All right, does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, and I had a second piece to that. I know that we've talked about some redundancy in positions. Tim mentioned it a couple of times, especially in the STEAM centers. Have we had a chance to dig down into that at all?
Our process for scheduling will be to look at a schedule that is based on the staffing level that the budget provides. So once we know what number it is that we have to shoot for, then we can develop a schedule, and then we have to, of course, look at the evaluation list and look for the areas where we think we can do an adequate job with potentially fewer staff. So we have to have the idea of how many staff we're going to have before we can create a schedule and identify what positions might be able to be removed. I know
Okay.
that sounds a little backwards, but in this case, we sort of have to start with the end in mind and then build the schedule. And that relates to making sure that buildings, right now the contract language calls for the planning time per staff member to be consistent in each building. And we have to make sure that that's the case. For instance, last year in the STEAM centers, the common number was really sort of uncommon. There were some teachers who had a little more and some people who had a little less. That had a lot to do with shared staff because there were, especially the musics, were shared between Compass and the STEAMs. So in order to build the schedule, we kind of need to have an idea of how many certified staff will have to go into this budget and then determine if by the time we're all done with all of these budget ideas, we determine that we only have to eliminate 3 positions. Then we can build a schedule based on 3 fewer positions and decide exactly specifically who those people are that would be at the bottom of the list.
And then on the flip side of that, do we know our capacity for the TVA right now as far as students versus staff?
I don't know if we have a capacity number. If we increase the TVA, and we're talking about, TVA delivers curriculum pretty well 7-12 as it is. And through this planning process for next year, we're developing something that would work well for K through 6 in a full online environment. So if that number comes up, if the state determines that it's okay to open your doors again and go back to school, but there are still some families, and according to our survey results, it's between 10 and 15% of families who would at least consider not coming back to school. If we had to take that, let's say it was 10%, just for a round number, if 10% of our kids transferred to the virtual academy, that would be about 260, 270 kids added to the virtual academy. In that case, some staff would have to transfer over to support that. They wouldn't be able to support that addition of students just internally, let alone if we have families from other districts decide that, you know, the service that we provide matches their needs. And let's say the number goes up by another 100 kids. We would again have to have some more support of people in that environment. But the virtual environment is not the same caseload requirement as the face-to-face. So it's not exactly, you know, you don't think in terms of every 25 kids in the virtual environment equals a teacher. It's more like plus 10 or 15 kids in the virtual environment. So yeah, if there's an increase or we have to move some of our internal kids over to the TVA, there's some staff need to go with that number. Yeah, we have to up the support for that group.
But you believe you can do that internally, correct?
I believe we can.
Okay.
We're talking about how that would be, but what would be nice is if you could guarantee that there was going to be a number per grade level, and you could say to a third grade teacher that we're going to reduce the live version of instruction by one person in third grade, but we're going to transfer that person to the online environment. And then let's say that at some point during the school year, we have a medical advancement and there's kids getting vaccines, and now all of a sudden we can shift that group back from the virtual environment into the classroom environment. That sort of scenario would be fantastic, but there's no way to know how many kids in a particular grade level or even an age range would be in that group of families who say, no, we don't want to come back face to face. So we have conceptualized how to do it by grade span, but not grade band, and you know, get some teachers in the right certification levels that they might be able to handle multiple grades in the virtual environment. Like I said, the ideal thing would be to identify specific teachers so that if their kids came back to the live environment during the school year, they would just pick up right where they left off in the virtual environment. But it's not going to be as clean as that. So we're thinking about that in our logistics committee and in the action plan committee to try to figure out just how that might work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Becky? You're muted, Becky.
I was trying to unmute and so were you. So I know we're meeting next week to finish the budget, and I mean, we've obviously covered this topic, but we are running out of time. So I just wanted to make sure we had some discussion before. I want to make sure we have everything sent to us for the next meeting. So we had talked about some cost savings if we close the admin building, if we could make sure we have that projection together for that meeting.
Yep.
Suzanne, you weren't here, but I made sure I had you back. We talked about if the busing situation, if we maybe have people sign up for busing, so we are only busing where we need to be busing, we should continue that conversation and maybe get Ben involved in that to see how that would look. We talked about contracts. We need to see the contracts. So all that stuff I would really like to have together for the next meeting. We are running out of time. We need to make these decisions. We've got $800,000 to cut, folks.
I do have some numbers on closing the administrative building, and I'm just trying to make sure it made it to you guys in this email. But okay, so we had part of the large savings that we had projected back when we initially talked about closing down the board building was the staffing to clean that board building. So the savings to cut that isn't as large as it was originally.
Okay.
Because we would still need that custodian to move over to whatever building we're in. If it's east, we would still need that custodian in this case to move over to east and clean up after us. Whereas initially we were talking about, potentially putting those staff in the high school or finding some other existing building that already is staffed with custodial. So the FY 1920, the budget currently to maintain the board building, which would be all but eliminated almost if we were to do this, would be a savings of $46,014. So if we were, however, we'd need to maintain the minimums for utilities and grounds. And so I estimated that to be about $8,000 to do that year round. So we're only looking at a savings about $37,464 to close the board building and then move that staff to east if we were to do that.
Well,
the other thing that I was thinking of was so we also have a whole host of community groups that use the space in the board building. So those groups would also need to, find space elsewhere. Lenaway's Child, the CLC, Learning Cove, etc. Groups that do tutoring and Wednesday morning play groups and things like that too.
Well, it sounds like some discussions to have.
All right, thank you. We had Suzanne and then John in that order. Suzanne?
Okay, my question is back to the busing. How exactly did we eliminate 3.5 routes? That seems enormous. Where did that come from? And how did they come to that conclusion?
That's really just a matter of Ben auditing the routes to find out. You have to account for every address that comes up on the route. And what he found was that we had addresses in there of kids that had graduated, no longer lived in the district. So when he did a full audit of the address list, he was able to eliminate probably 150 different addresses through our 20-some routes that we shouldn't have been accounting for.
No, and that kind of leads me to wonder how long that's been going on, for one thing, and who's responsible for that. They get a monthly fee of, obviously, according to Nikki, $100,000. Wouldn't you think that maintaining accurate records and is part of that?
It's probably exactly why there's a new director in that position this year.
Well, it just makes me wonder how much more we could be cut with, like Becky said, if you sign up. Okay, that's all I got.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. We had John was up next again, I think.
The other part of that, Suzanne, was eliminating east busing. That was part of that 3.5 routes by closing east. So it was getting rid of old addresses and removing east from the route. But I was going to say to Nikki, I think the original suggestion was to move the admin out of the admin building into other buildings that are still open, like Compass and the high school, not to move them to east. If we're gonna keep east closed, we were talking about the savings that we would see by having 2 buildings closed versus just east.
Okay. So I think there's one custodian in that building. Run us about $27,000 additional then, if that were the case.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, when we originally talked about this last year, it was going to be in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $70,000 to close the admin building.
Yep, that would make sense. Yep.
Then we did have the issue that Nikki brought up, the other tenants in the admin building, our community partners like CLC. That's gonna leave them homeless unless we have extra space in the high school to house them also.
Compass has space.
There would be some openings in the Compass building for the Learning Cove and for CLC. Without putting the preschool there, we open up a little bit of capacity for, 2 or 3 rooms to share with others.
Okay, so that was taken into consideration. At the next meeting, could we have an evaluation of closing both the buildings as opposed to closing the admin and moving the tenants over to the East Center then?
Sure thing.
Well,
Thank you very much, Nikki. Thank you, Rick. Were there any other questions, any other comments on this? All right. Moves our discussion up to our next item, which is the most amusing thing on our agenda. Additional time forgiven for the 2 days for the 1920 school year. Rick?
right, the people accounting person at the ISD level notified Terry a couple of weeks ago that it looked like Tecumseh still needed to ask for forgiveness for 2 days. I don't pretend to understand why. We had called 6 snow days up to the point of the school closure by the state. But apparently we had to apply for 2 extra days. Terry handled the paperwork. I signed it, we sent it off, and in very unusual state circumstances, they turned it around in about 2 weeks, and we got our approval via email.
All right. Any comments or discussion on that item? Looks like the chessboard is clear, so we're going to move on to, we have a donation for our sculpture garden. Mr. Hilderly, details?
Yes, just thank you for the donation from that individual. I'm not sure the pronunciation on the last name, Peter Schnack. And that money will go to support the nicely developed sculpture garden at Tecumseh High School.
Thank you, sir. That'll bring us to our action items for tonight. The first action item is the food service contract extension. Could I get a motion on that, please?
I hereby move to approve the 1-year contract extension with Aramark Food Services for the 2020 through 2021 school year as approved by MDE.
Support.
Roll call vote. Suzanne?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
John? Milt?
Aye.
And Kevin, aye. Unanimous support passes. Next action item is policy number 8450, which is an update to the control of casual contact communicable diseases. Motion on that, please.
I hereby move to approve the board policy number 8450, control of casual contact communicable diseases.
Support.
Roll call vote. Milt?
Aye.
John? Tim?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
And Kevin, aye. Unanimous support, motion passes. Next action item is the LISD Shared Business Services Contract. Could I get a motion, please?
I hereby move to extend the current shared business services contract with the LISD, which expires June 30th of 2020, for an additional time not to exceed 3 months, which will help with the transition of services to TPS. It is further agreed that TPS will pay the daily and monthly rates as set forth by the LISD for these services through September 30th of 2020.
Support.
Roll call vote. Suzanne,
Aye.
Becky,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
John, Milt,
aye.
and Kevin, aye. Motion passes, unanimous support. Last item for action tonight is acceptance of the donation for the sculpture garden. Can I get a motion?
I hereby move to accept with thanks the $1,500 donation from Peter Shanik for the THS Sculpture Garden.
Or,
Roll call vote. Milt,
aye.
John, Tim,
Aye.
Becky,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Aye.
and Kevin, aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report for tonight. Superintendent's evaluation process is the topic. Rick?
Okay, first of all, I have some additional items that aren't on the agenda, but to start with, at this point in the year on the MASB evaluation tool, I am to just review the goals once again that I have for myself with the board. And then the process says that board members can form individual questions between now and the next board meeting. Direct those questions to the board president, and I will provide information answering those questions related to these goals. So that's where we are in the process to review. I had 4 goal areas. One would be to, by November of this year, implement TPS policy manual upgrades and begin working on administrative guidelines. We're in the process of that. I don't know that by November we're going to be all the way through the process, but we will be at a point where we've taken off a pretty good chunk of those guidelines. So progress is being made on the policy manual. So if you have questions about that, I'll be happy to give you more information at the next meeting. Goal statement 2 had to do with the reorganization, which the way that the goal is written, it isn't going to be fully implemented, but this was based on the December approval of the reorganization plan. So, that goal could be amended to include the revised plan. And I'll talk about the moving process and how we're doing with that in just a moment. Goal area 3 had to do with strategic planning. That was something that we had hoped to get underway this spring. Another victim of the COVID pandemic. We'll still attempt, the goal is to have that process begun by November. So that is something that we will attempt to get started shortly after we get back to school. And then goal area 4 has already been accomplished. That was the report that I did in March on the portions of my 100-day plan of entry into the district. So you have this on email. Hopefully you didn't worry about writing down any notes or trying to memorize all that. And then between now and the next meeting, address any questions to Kevin, and he will pose those questions to me and I'll get them answered for you by the next meeting. So that's it on goals. Some of the other information that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. You just passed the motion on business services. Got the rates for the monthly numbers, not more than 3 months. Now that resolution has been made and passed, we will get postings both in the business office and also HR services. So our goal is to develop positions that will support the processes that need to happen, but also possibly the savings to the district. And we'll get that process started relatively soon. And I'll make a report at each meeting until we have those things wrapped up. I mentioned moving that began today. If you go by Compass, there's a large U-Haul truck in the driveway. Between Mr. Lewis and a couple of other staff members that were paying some stipends, and also the custodial crew at Compass, I think they moved 3 classrooms today. They are hoping to beat the weather tomorrow and move a couple of more classrooms tomorrow. The goal is to have everything out of Compass and at the ELCs by the end of the week. And then we'll get the classrooms cleaned at Compass and begin to move the 7th grade materials over to this location. I think if the moving is ahead of the cleaning, that in the interim, the 7th grade materials will go into the small gym, be sectioned off by tape on the floor. We're really trying to be as careful as we can to keep everybody's possessions all together in this move. So that would be moved into the gym, specifically identified, marked off, and then when rooms are clean and can receive the teacher items, then they'll be moved into the classrooms. So that process seems to be going well. After one day. Things looked good. Item handout for individuals who had things left in buildings. That process began today. The feedback that I have from the administrators is that things were smooth, on the side of quiet compared to chaotic. We're hopeful that quite a few people show up tomorrow because we got a lot of bags, with a lot of kids' names on them that haven't been picked up yet. But tomorrow is the day that includes the evening pickup. So for parents who are back to work, we do expect to see quite a few of them at the evening portion of the pickup tomorrow. A lot of help from staff on that. Teachers have volunteered, and they're masked and gloved and participating in that. But when I observed today at the 4 locations that I went to, again, a lot of happy kids wanting to see their teachers, which was fun. The Distance Learning Action Committee will meet for its 3rd meeting on Wednesday. All of the breakout committees are meeting throughout the week. Our logistic committee meets 2 other times beside the Wednesday meeting, and starting to really fine tune what school will look like in an online environment, whether that environment is for everyone or for a small group. So the next phase of the plan will be for the administrative team to wrap up all those details and then begin communicating that to our families. Once we have more guidelines from the state on what school is expected to look like. So a lot of good work there being done. Tomorrow night is the first meeting for the Building Futures Committee, the community-based action group that will be studying our facilities needs. That first meeting is going to be in a Zoom session, which is not the preferred method, but that's just the way that the world is right now. And then another session later on could potentially be allowed to happen in person. So trying to stay on track with that group making a recommendation later this fall on potential upgrades to our facilities. And I'll be giving you updates at each meeting following one of those meetings. And then lastly, after making the decision to close childcare for the summer, new guidelines from the state and an application to reopen your childcare if you so chose was given. So we made that application, and we have lots of families who are interested in coming to us for summer childcare. So there are some stipulations for who can be involved with that, and Joanne Leip, our child care director, is looking into that. I've given her the green light to explore what options families might need and get opened up if we can meet the guidelines that have been outlined by the state. So I think that's all the items on my list. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, that's it for me.
All right, thank you, Rick. Any questions? Oh. Looks like Milt. There you are,
Just
Milt.
one question about graduation. Can you kind of give us an update or, I mean, so we can plan our summer?
It's planned for Sunday, July 19th. If you went by the guidelines as they sit today, we would probably have to do a drive-through graduation. If you consider the possible recommendations, if we do slip into phase 5 between now and then we could have as many as 500 people in the football stadium for graduation. So there's a bit of a range there in those two plans. If we do a graduation indoors, which would certainly be more climate comfortable, the phase 5 recommendations for group size is 250 people. So that would include pretty much the graduates, the board, and the central administration. That wouldn't allow room for families or staff in any way. So right now our focus is on that group size of 500 with a few guests invited per family. And if things don't improve and we're not in that phase 5 recommendation level, then we'll have to do a drive-through version. I know 2 of the schools in the county have already had a drive-through graduation and actually had some pretty positive feedback on how that all went. So we have a little bit to go on. We have some recommendations from some people who've tried some things. And I'm happy that we put it off further into the future so that we have some potential options for how we want to plan things. But the 19th is the date. And, we could push it back maybe another week if there's weather. But I think we'll have a weather option for indoors that would just require no guests.
All right, thank you. Let's, Becky. Oh, I'm sorry, were you done, Milt?
I was going to mention, Rick, there was, I seen one school in Florida had a wave runner graduation if you wanted to do it out at your house.
That's not real Michigan friendly. Rick, I know it's a lot of work, but I'm just curious, have we thought about if those guidelines aren't lifted of just doing like A through M and then M through Z and do 2 separate ceremonies so that they could be indoors?
Yeah, that's a possibility. I know that's how Adrian is approaching it. They're actually going to do an outdoor graduation at Maple Stadium with alphabetical splits. So, yeah, I mean, if the guidelines come up, we could still use the same day and just do 2 different times. It is mid-July, so I'm suggesting that we, probably do an earlier in the day graduation than the 2 o'clock that we normally do. But yeah, I mean, we could have the bulk of the staff and administration in place and just change out the graduates and their families if we have to.
It would be a long day, but I mean, we all know how important it is, and it hasn't been a fair year for them.
Griff is working, he's working mostly on those sorts of things with the senior class officers.
Right.
And really trying to satisfy the recommendations of that group.
Okay, thank you.
John?
I had another thought. Sienna Heights has a really big field house. I don't know if we could think about, reaching out to them and see if we could use something like that as well. I know it's not quite the same, but if we needed to do something indoors, that's a bigger facility.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would want to do that if there were guidelines that would allow us to have more participation. But if it's 250, whether we go there or use our gym, then I think the kids would just choose to stay here.
Right.
All right. Thank you, John. This will push us on to our consent agenda for tonight. We've got a couple of minutes and a monthly check register. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I hereby move to approve the consent agenda, which includes the following items. Minutes from the Board Budget Committee meeting of May 28th, 2020. Minutes from the Special Board Study Session meeting of June 3rd, 2020. And the monthly check registry for May of 2020.
Or
Roll call vote. Suzanne?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
John?
I
Milt?
aye.
And Kevin, aye. Unanimous. The consent agenda passes. Items scheduled for our next agenda. Our discussion items will include a budget hearing at 6:30 p.m. Before our 7 o'clock meeting. Please note, 6:30 p.m. will be the budget hearing. We will set the date for our annual July board organizational meeting. We'll have action items. It will be the final budget for last year, the projected budget for the upcoming year, and probably a couple other things that we add between now and then. That'll move us on to our last public comment. We had no registrants for the last public comment either, so we move to board member comments and discussion. Comments and discussion from board? John?
just a quick question for Rick. I was reading the letter from the math department, and I don't know if I was the only one that thought this, but last year, after we got a presentation from the math department, I thought all teachers 6 through 12 were going to be using this program. So I want to make sure that next year, all of our math teachers are using the same program. And then I was also curious as to what we're doing with getting the 5th grade teachers involved in this process, because I noticed there were some additional items for 5th graders that would tie into what we're doing in our 6 through 12 group.
Yeah, the 5th grade has been kind of that swing group in the math curriculum conversation. And I know that the department has struggled with that, trying to bring them within. They've had some input. I think that they would like to be included in this, but they need some time to further investigate the materials that would go lower than 6th grade. The present materials work pretty well 6-12. The other stuff, I think that they would recommend the same company because it is a feeder program, but we'd have to get teacher input on that.
And then what about
As far as the curriculum, it's an all in. It's all in.
Okay.
The whole group is going to be, when I came on board in November, the ship had already sailed. I was told at that time that there wasn't, in the pilot program, there weren't enough licenses for everybody to participate. If we move forward with this curriculum, we will have the adequate licenses. The training will be mandatory and the use of the curriculum will be mandatory.
The pilot program, we could have purchased additional licenses though, correct?
I believe that we could have, but we didn't. And the year started off without everybody on board.
So I just want to confirm that the reason that they weren't using the program wasn't a licensing issue, it was a choice issue.
That part I really can't confirm, John, but I think that you're right.
Okay.
All right, thank you, John. Becky?
That wasn't what I was going to comment on, but I'll get back to mine. I'm going to just back John on that. I know, Rick, you weren't here, but I believe, at least when I voted as the board member, that was going to be a program for the entire, it was not a pilot program. That word wasn't in the vocabulary. So it is what it is. This coming year, we know it's going to be used, and that makes me very happy. Seems to have been a great program, and I'm glad that we approved that. But what I wanted to say was I wanted to thank Rick and all of our staff for making the senior year as special as it could be. Your good news was good to hear, and I'm glad we've got some more things coming. It's been a rough year for everybody, but I really feel they got shortchanged. So thank you for all of you putting in all that hard work. Griff and Mr. Anastasia for dropping off the information you were talking about and the letters that you teachers have written. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, the one that I forgot to mention was the Griff and Jake provided that sign, the banner that's hanging downtown that says congratulations, graduates. They did that on their own, and that was a surprise to our graduates.
That's awesome.
All right, any further board member discussion? All right, the Hollywood squares are quiet. We're moving to an adjournment to closed session pursuant to PA 267 of 1976, Section 8, subsection H, to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute, i.e. attorney-client privilege information. Could I get a motion to adjourn to closed session, please?
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, Suzanne,
Aye.
Becky,
Aye.
Tim,
Hey.
John,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Kevin. Aye. The board is in closed session at 8:14 p.m. I will join all of you in a minute. All right, can you hear me? All right, everyone should be back and able to unmute themselves. The Board of Education is back in session at 9:15 p.m. We have action on the some of the closed session topics. Can I get a motion, please?
There we go. I was looking for the language here. And I believe this is it. Having reviewed Mrs. Nowak's resignation and related separation agreement in closed session, the board president is authorized to execute the separation agreement on behalf of the board, and the superintendent is authorized to accept Ms. Nowak's resignation.
Okay, can I get a motion to authorize that?
Support.
Good, roll call. Milt,
Aye.
Becky,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Aye.
John,
No.
Tim,
Aye.
Kevin, aye. Motion passes 5-1. That brings us to our adjournment for tonight. Could I get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
So moved. Support.
Support by Brooks.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Support.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you
Ray.
very much. Thank you, Ray.
Oh,
Everyone have a good night, and
Yeah.
we will see you at the budget meeting.
Okay.
Well, when is that? When is that, Kevin?
Oh,
It has not been set yet.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we'll get it set for
Next week.
sometime in the next 2 weeks, yeah.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you.